Hello friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about the decline in automobile sales in India. Now if we look at the current affair, we will see that leading automobile manufacturers has announced that there is a sharp decline in the sales of automobiles up to 50%. So in the domestic sales of automobiles in India, there is a decline by about 50% in the month of July 2019. So this has got widespread implications on Indian economy as a whole. So this trend has a potential of impacting the Indian economy and its macroeconomic indicators to a larger extent. So we need to analyze what are the reasons for this fall and what implications it will have on Indian economy and what has to be done in order to revive from this situation. So we will discuss all these in detail in this lecture. So let us first understand what are the recent happenings. So the market leader Maruti Suzuki reported a 36.2% drop in the sales during the month of July 2019. So here a drop in the sales essentially means that there is a decline in the aggregate demand for automobiles. So this is an indicator that the consumption pattern of Indian economy is changing. Now, Indian economy's growth model is based on consumption model. It means that the growth of Indian economy highly depends upon the aggregate demand or consumption. So, when the aggregate demand declines, it indicates that the consumption pattern has shifted and now the consumption of Indian households has come down. So, this will have serious implications on economic growth of Indian economy. Now, secondly, the manufacturers are going for a cut in the production now. It means that due to decrease in demand, the supply is also now coming down. This is because the market, in order to maintain the equilibrium, the demand and the supply has to be equal. That is, aggregate demand has to be equal to aggregate supply. Now, when there is a lesser demand in the market, the production will also come down. This means that the supply will be reduced in order to meet only the demand. So this will have huge implications. For example, when the production comes down, the output will come down. Now, in order to produce lesser output, the manufacturers will need only lesser raw materials. So the raw material industry would be seriously affected. Now, secondly, another factor of production or a component in production is the requirement of labor. So in order to produce less, in order to get lesser output, the labor requirements also will come down. That means many people will lose their job. So it has serious impacts or implications on the economy as a whole. Now if we look at the cut in production and the automobile industry, the impact on labor or job losses would be even higher. This is because automobile industry is also a labor intensive industry where the number of labors required is very high. So when there is a cut in the production, these labor will lose their employment and will go into serious unemployment. Now let us come to different segments. How the drop in the sales is happening over different segments of automobiles in India. The first segment is passenger vehicle segment. So the sales in the passenger vehicle segment has witnessed a fall by almost 18.4%. And now if we see the commercial vehicle segment, around 16.6 is the drop in the sales. Now two-wheelers or the sale in two-wheelers, the drop is around 11.7%. Now let us come to the causes. What are the causes behind this? The first one is the NBFC crisis. We have already discussed about the NBFC crisis in detail. If you want to know more about the NBFC crisis, you can find the topic NBFC crisis on our channel StudyIQ, where I have in detail explained about the NBFC crisis, its origin, its background, its implications, and also how it is going to affect the banking system in Indian economy. Now, the NBFC crisis started with the IL&FS crisis. So, with the NBFC crisis, there was a liquidity crisis or a liquidity squeeze in the market. Now, this liquidity crisis essentially means that the money supply has come down. So, liquidity is cash or cash equivalent. So, with lesser liquidity, So with lesser liquidity or a squeeze in the liquidity, the money supply in the market would be very less. It means people have less money to spend or less money to purchase. The purchasing power of the people will come down. So with lesser purchasing power, their aggregate demand also will come down. And when aggregate demand comes down, the consumption will also come down. So that is the first reason why there is a decline in the demand for automobile. So this liquidity crisis is one major issue. Now second one is the consumer sentiment. Here consumer sentiment means that the interest or the demand from the consumer side. So the demand for a consumer will depend on various factors. The first one is obviously the price. So price is one major component that will influence the decision of a consumer to purchase a particular good or to avail a particular service. Second factor is the income of the consumer. Third factor is the price of substitutes. Now, fourth factor is the expectation of a fall in the prices in the future. Now, these are all some of the factors that will influence the consumer while making a decision to purchase. Now, first one is price. So, whenever the price increases, the demand will also come down. Second one is income. When income increases, the demand will also increase. Third one is price of substitutes. When substitutes are available at cheaper price, the demand for a particular commodity will come down. The fourth one is an expectation that the prices will fall in the future. Here the fourth factor is very, very important. The customers here, they are postponing their decision to purchase automobiles on an expectation that in the future the prices will fall, and this is based on various interpretations. The first one is there is an expected fall in the GST, that is goods and services taxes on automobiles. So it is expected that the GST on automobiles in the near future will come down. So whenever there is a decrease in the taxes, the prices will come down. So on an expectation that in future the prices will come down, the customers have postponed their decision on purchase. Now, the second factor is that there is a hope that the government is also promoting transition towards electronic vehicles. So this is another factor that influences the decision of the consumers. So government would be announcing big discounts or big subsidies in order to promote electronic vehicles. So this is the second factor. Third factor is the transition from BS4 to BS6. Now another factor is the upcoming festive season. So Diwali season will begin, and during that time there is a expected price fall. So these are all some of the factors that have influenced the decision of the consumer to postpone their purchase of the automobiles. Now another factor that has caused a decrease in the sale of automobiles is a slowdown in the rural economy. We have already discussed about the NBFC crisis, and along with that is the slowdown in rural economy or in agricultural economy. So when there is a slowdown in agricultural economy or in rural economy, it can impact the aggregate demand. This is because more than 50% of India's population is engaged in agricultural activities or are employed in agricultural sector or the primary sector. So in terms of employment, agriculture sector is very important. Now in terms of GDP also, agricultural sector contributes significantly. So whenever there is a slowdown in agricultural sector, it implies that overall there is a decline in aggregate demand and aggregate consumption. So these are all some of the causes that has led to a decline in the sale of automobiles in the last quarter. Now let us come to its indication or implication. What does it imply? As we discussed earlier, this indicates that there is a change or there is a decline in consumer sentiment, and also it indicates an overall slowdown in the economy. Now, how is the slowdown in the economy calculated? This is on the basis of GDP. Now, GDP is gross domestic product, and it is the monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in an economy in a financial year. Now, it is based on output or production that the overall growth rate of an economy is determined. Now, a slowdown in the economy means that the growth rate of the economy has slowed down or has declined. So, this slowdown is based on the growth rate of the economy. Now, With lesser sales of automobiles, we have seen that there is a production cut. This is because the manufacturers has announced a production cut or have declined their percentage of supply. This is to meet the equilibrium. Demand is less, therefore supply has also been reduced. So with lesser supply, it essentially means that production cut has been adopted or there is lesser production. So with lesser production, there is only lesser output. So lesser output means lesser GDP. Now understand that in terms of GDP, we calculate the growth of an economy or whether economy is going into a slowdown. So when GDP declines, it means there is a slowdown in the economy. And automobile sector is one significant sector that will contribute towards the growth rate or the slowdown or whatever of either the positive or the negative side of growth in economy. So this is the first indication. Now second indication is the job losses. Now here job losses means that a situation where the unemployment rate will increase in Indian economy. Now if we consider the automobile sector, it is a labor intensive sector. It employs large number of labor. So when there is a production cut, the factors of production employed will also come down. Now what are the factors of production? The first one is land. Second one is labor. The third one is capital. And the fourth one is entrepreneurship. So if we look at the four factors of production, when the production declines, initially two factors of production will also decline. These are labor and capital. So immediate effect will be reflected in labor and capital. The manufacturer will cut down the number of laborers and the capital inducted will also come down. So directly it impacts labor and capital. So when there is a production cut or an output cut, it means that many people will be losing their jobs and these people will be jobless. So this leads to a situation of unemployment, which is a very negative signal of economic growth or economic development. So this is another implication. Now the third implication is with regard to aggregate consumption demand. Now the aggregate consumption demand depends on money supply or the purchasing power. Now many factors including the NBFC crisis, slowdown in rural economy, unemployment, all these have contributed towards lesser purchasing power. So with lesser purchasing power, the demand will decline. So with lesser demand, there will be lesser production. This is because if there is lesser demand, production needs to take place only to meet that demand. So again there will be a cut in output and GDP will also slow down. Now here what is more important is that Indian economy is a consumption driven economy. Now to understand this better, let us compare Indian economy with Chinese economy. Now Chinese economy has adopted a growth model which is dependent on exports. This means that exports is a segment which will boost economic growth in China. But to contrary, Indian economy is a consumption driven economy, which means the consumption or the aggregate demand in Indian economy is what drives the growth rate in India. So as we are a consumption driven economy, when the aggregate demand or the consumption has a decline, this will have very serious implications on all the macroeconomic parameters including GDP, per capita income, unemployment rate, inflation rates, all these will have negative impact. So in order to revive from this situation, it is very important and it is most important to increase the aggregate demand, and this cannot be taken and this cannot be done in a short while. So in order to boost aggregate demand or consumption, all the sectors including the primary, secondary and tertiary sector needs attention, and employment needs to be created, more purchasing power needs to be created, money supply should be increased, and only then the aggregate demand can be increased. And in this context, one important measure taken by the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI is to cut down on the interest rates. So by cutting down the interest rates, money supply in the economy will increase, and with higher money supply, there will be more purchasing power with the people, and therefore their aggregate demand and consumption will increase. So this is the monetary policy that has been taken by RBI. Now, along with the monetary policy, the central government has also to take fiscal policies. This can be in the form of subsidies or government expenditure in order to increase the aggregate demand in the economy. So it is very much important and essential to raise the aggregate demand and consumption in Indian economy in order to increase the growth rate in our economy. You can find the PDF of this lecture on our website www.studyiq.com. You can also follow my Facebook page for more video updates. You can also write to me at joyce.studyiq@gmail.com for any of your queries and clarifications. Thank you.